Welcome punters to the Punters Academy debut show with John Walter from Racing Watch. John, how are you?
Well mate, thank you.
We're looking forward to bringing punters some cutting edge and thought-provoking discussion with regards to your questions that you have regarding racing and betting. It could just be a current affairs issue and so forth. So really the Punters Academy is a joint initiative that we developed between Ratings to Win, which is obviously myself, Paul Daly, and John Walter from Racing Watch. And the idea is to obviously bring a discussion to punters regarding different topics of interest, and we've got a number of questions today, John, so I thought we might go through some of those.
Yeah, it's good to get off. Like, we've only obviously gone out yesterday and asked for a few. We've got a bunch, so I don't think we're going to struggle for content week to week, which is good, and hopefully we'll dust through some today and we'll elaborate on some bigger issues that are just too broad to cover probably in a short talk between us, but yeah, we'll get to all of them as much as we can anyway.
Okay, terrific. So we might just start off here with one from Matt. It says, "Hi guys, if you get a chance, I'd like to know how you do the form for a horse changing stables. Just as an example, Penny Fling in race 3 at Port Macquarie on Monday goes from Pride to Sprague. How would you do the form and figures for a runner like that?" John, would you like to talk about your point of view on that?
So I had a quick look at this one. It was coming off a bit of a longer break between trainers, so whether there was an issue or something, every case is going to be different. But for me, if it's a short break, you might have Waller's. A few of his runners are going to say Chris Lee's at the moment coming off a 2 or 3 week break. He's not going to do a lot to that horse in that time. Yeah. If they're coming off a 3 to 6 month break, then it's probably had a full preparation with the new trainer, so you're approaching it just like it's trained by one of their horses. So whether it's a positive or a negative from your point of view, whether it's changing from you to me, everyone's got different views, but it's all about how long they've had the horse to me, how I approach the horse. So if it's a short period, I'm still treating it like basically it's trained by the old trainer. 3 months or longer, it's the new trainer, and that's probably all I could say, as in sort of when you're doing figures form, that I'm treating it like a different trainer depending on time.
Well, that's interesting. This horse had about 10 months off and resumed. It bled at the end of last preparation and it went from Pride. Now, at Ratings to Win, what we do is we rate trainers and jockeys, giving them a numerical scale based on their actual versus expected performance. That's one of the key metrics that we use in ascertaining the numbers. Now, Joe Pride rates a 3.2 on our system in terms of the ratings that I use internally, and the other trainer, the new trainer, Sprague, rates 2.4. So there's roughly about half a link difference between the two in terms of their records, adjusted for the fact that obviously one's training in a metropolitan area and one's training in a country area. But from my point of view, the way I tend to treat these horses is if there's a significant change in stable from, say a renowned metropolitan stable to a country stable, depending on the stable itself and obviously the time off and so forth, I tend to be a little bit hard on the horses. But at the end of the day, if you can't judge it, the best way to treat it is to let the market give you an indication in terms of betting support just how well advanced that horse might be, because often you'll get horses, say, going from a Waterhouse or a Waller to, say, North Queensland, and often they're coming with decent form references that would make them a short price favourite in those races.
Which are unrealistic, absolutely, yeah. And you don't know the background, that's right. The beauty of this horse, at least, we had a trial to deal with, but a lot of the time you don't. You're saying they're moving from Melbourne to country New South Wales or even higher up here. It's very difficult in betting, obviously. Usually it's the best guide. If there's no support, maybe give him a watch for the day.
And I think that's probably a fair comment about any first up runner is, betting support's so important. If you look at the returns that all runners who are first up provide, who are supported versus those that aren't, there's a distinct difference in terms of your ability to profit from those runners long term. So from my point of view, if you can't rate the horse accurately, use the market as a guide and obviously keep an eye out for betting support late, especially on Betfair.
Can't improve on that. Perfect.
Okay, so the next one's from Philip. Hi John, how about the issue I raised with you previously, how to rate horses second up who have had performed poorly or been forgive runs first up? This is something that I really struggle with, and I'm sure that many others would appreciate your views as well.
Me first again? Or do you want to? You can have a first go at this time if you'd like.
Well, if the horse went out well last preparation, my view is that horses that go out well often come back well. So I think that's the first key to look at. How did the horse?
Big secret, actually. It's probably not looked at enough. We wouldn't want to glance over that one.
No,
Too much. Like, no, if someone listening wouldn't want to glance over that one. It's a key point that your horses go out in bad form, you're much more wary of them returning, whereas horses that go out in good form and even a good spell and come back, it's an interesting thing to look at. But that's another time.
That's a bit of a pearl, and certainly not one that I thought of, and one that I know Mark Reed sort of was very much a fan of many years ago, and that's where I first heard it. So look, in terms of how to deal with them, obviously you've got to look into the circumstances of the first up run. You know, was the horse suited? Was it fancied? Was it in the betting? You know, what type of stable was it from? Was there some excuse? Was it racing over an unsuitable trip? Was the track condition against the horse? Was there anything in the stewards report to note? All those things that you need to sort of consider. But assuming that on face value the horse was just disappointing, I think you've also got to consider the age of the horse too, because often horses who can race well as say 2-year-olds may not come back as 3-year-olds. You know, they might have really good form references to suggest that they're leading chances in the race, but they just don't come up in a particular campaign. So you've got to consider that as a possibility as well. But at the end of the day, once again, if you feel that the horse suffered an excuse or had a reason for failure, then you could probably take its better ratings towards the end of last preparation or over a similar distance and maybe apply a fitness penalty. But be conservative and be flexible enough to, you know, obviously pay attention and heed what the market tells you.
Absolutely, yeah. The investigation of that first up run and fitness into going into it, distance it was, all that sort of, that's where it all kind of lies around for me. I really want to, why did it fail? Can it improve naturally, or am I just sort of guessing? Which I'll, as you say, be conservative. If I'm guessing, I might, forgive it a little bit. But if there's an explanation for why it might have failed, I'll be much more forgiving than if it's more question mark and just having a throw at the stumps. Yeah.
So Philip, we hope that sort of answers your question in regards to what you put to us. John, there's another one from you. In regard to a topic of educational segment, I'd like your insight on the process for reviewing race videos. I did watch your earlier video piece on doing pre-race assessments, but I'm hoping to get an idea of whether you particularly focus on earlier or latter parts of the race or neither. So maybe we can break this question down in parts. Yes. So what do you think about that first one, John?
So both are important, obviously, but it's the start's very important. This is of an actual race, I'm assuming, is what he's saying.
Yeah.
So the beginning of the race is very important. What happened there, how fast they've gone, where it sort of ended up compared to where you expected it to be, and then obviously the finish and how the horse has finished off the race, depending on what's happened, sections. There's obviously a lot of things that go into the makeup of the race between the start and the finish, but they're both as important to me. But you still must cover the middle. So I think the start's probably the most important, but looking at of the performance of the day on that day, but looking to the next start, I want to be very investigative of the last part of the race as well. So trying to work out why the horse did what it did on that day, I'm looking at the start, but for future points, I'm looking at the end very intently. So they both play a part in future and of that day performance. So they're both as important as each other for mine.
And when you're looking at the finish, and this sort of partly gets covered off in the next point, you're not just looking at the way in which the horse finishes for the naked eye, are you? You've got to take into account the sectionals and have some sort of an idea of what you're expecting to see.
Yeah, you've got to make sure it's real, that's for sure, which is where sort of me finding you in life has helped me a lot, whereas I had to sort of subscribe to sectional things, try and figure out whether it was real myself, try and figure out it against similar classes on the day, breaking it down. Things like ratings to win are really good at as part-times, providing part-time sectional part-times, trying to work out very quickly whether what you see is real. So a horse might attack the line, but it's attacking the line in a really slow section for that sort of class, and then it might not look that great to the eye, but it's doing the opposite. They're all coming home quickly, and it's essential that you have some sort of figures to back it up to what you're seeing. Absolutely. So that's the whole point of the game for me, and that's where the gap is what people go off with their eye. Is the general public is what forms a great percentage of the market, and then investigating it, making sure it's all real, is where the edge is.
Yeah, I believe that to be correct. The next part of Craig's question was whether or not you actually watch an individual horse from start to finish when you're reviewing the tapes. Do you?
I would like to say I do every time. I should every time, but there will be some that will watch not as intently as others, and I'm definitely going through the form the next time. So when I'm reviewing a meeting, I try to, but I wouldn't say that I do religiously. There are some that I would skip over just due to time constraints, but when they're running at their next start, I definitely go back and watch at least their last start or two, especially if they're a horse I'm very interested in, and watch them from start to finish. But when reviewing a meeting, I try to, but definitely I probably do skip over a few more than I probably should.
But you can probably do that because of the experience that you've had in watching the tapes, and also, you know, having regard to the horse's starting price.
Yes.
So the horse is a 50 or 100 to 1 chance, and you've watched the race and you can't see anything.
So if it's run second or third, I'm
yes.
trying to work out why it did. If it's run last, I'm probably not. I'm skipping over it a bit more because that's where it's expected to run. So if it does something that it shouldn't have done, I'm trying to work out why. Otherwise, I might skip over those a bit more than I probably should. Yeah, they're the horses that are usually the ones that skip. That's for sure.
That's right.
Yes.
And how long would you spend typically reviewing a Sydney Saturday program from a video analysis point of view?
Saturday's obviously a little bit more difficult because there's 9 races in Sydney. It probably takes a good hour or two minimum to get through, and that's now having your help through having times already kind of sent through to me, which saves having to try and work out sections and things that would have taken longer before. It probably 10 to 15 minutes a meeting, a race is not is probably typical. It's probably typical, and that's, as you say, having done it for quite a while, so I can rush through it a bit more than most people would, I'd say.
Okay, great. Well, Craig, hopefully that answers your questions in terms of how John handles the videos. So we'll move on to the next one. Jockeys, how important are they actually? How should we measure their success or failures? Is it consistently in making the right decisions? And how relevant is the jockey's current form? How can we measure it? Now, there's lots of questions there, and obviously there's a number of detailed replies that would take a session on their own just to talk about jockeys. I think, John, that's fair enough.
Absolutely.
From my point of view, it's probably more about actual versus expected performance, and it's got a lot to do with the fact that we rate the jockeys and we rate the trainers, and so I very much rely on what my figures tell me. They are dynamic in nature, meaning that they change each day, so they're updated each day on a rolling basis. So I'm always looking through the hourglass, as it were, backwards, so I can see, you know, that there are trends and there are changes in a jockey's performance. We're looking at both short-term performance and medium and long-term performance, and we apply a balance of rating to those figures that we believe accurately reflects the current form cycle of the jockey or the trainer in question. So there's a lot of questions in there. And,
but obviously, from a point of view from where you're saying, it's an inherent part of your system. It's an integral part of your system. So you obviously believe it's important. Both their current form and the jockey itself is highly important. So yeah, and I would say the same thing. Current form is definitely a very important topic, and confidence in jockeys and their decision making. So in short term, I think we both think jockeys are a really important part of selection of horses overall, and the way we expect them to go, and definitely current form and their ability to make decisions, which is also part of their current form, I think, and a bit of confidence level is important. So the jockey, yes; current, yes; and decision making. How you can measure it, you can go as crazy as Paul and write crazy algorithms, or it's opinion based from someone like me. I rely on people like Paul to at least alert me if I see changes in his jockey figures. I might look at them. There's a horse, like if I've got a negative opinion of how a jockey might be going at the moment, I see that Paul's elevated his number, I might go and investigate it myself. So having checks from other people is obviously important too, no matter how good you think you are in this game. So yeah, keeping an eye on them and having a look at other people's opinions. There's other places that provide statistics and things as well, which are great.
And realistically too, it's it all depends on the type of horse you're backing and the type of field it's contesting. So if you've got a small field, or say perhaps a less fashionable jockey on a leader, and you're keen on that horse, there's no reason why you should necessarily not have confidence to bet just because that jockey has an overall poor record, because in those situations you can afford to be a little bit more forgiving, I feel.
Absolutely, and usually the market is pretty much factoring that in, and possibly more overcompensating. So there could be an edge there, absolutely.
So Steve's also talked about trainers here in a similar fashion, identifying their performances and why is it that certain stables have runs of success. Obviously these days, or at least we hope it is, not due to artificial influences. And I find somewhat statistically irrational that stables have huge runs of success, yet it seems to be the norm. I expect it starts with competence, a decent horse or two, but then becomes the measuring stick for other horses, the placement of horses, attracting better jockeys, attracting better owners, horses, etc. Yet even with these factors, I believe that the competence and belief are big influences. I have some data on a few factors that I will pull out and share with you. You find it interesting from a profitability perspective. Distance travelled from the horse stable to the racetrack, interested in your opinions. From my point of view, Steve, the travelling issue is one that you can actually glean some insight from. Generally horses don't travel long distances if they can avoid it, and if you've got a good trainer who's willing to travel a horse, X 100 kilometres to say start in a maiden race somewhere in the bush, that means something.
There's a reason, yeah. So there's a stable in New South Wales that's sort of really big on that sort of thing, and that's like Angela Davies. She's a really good strike rate trainer, and she'll travel them 5, 6, 7 hours to find the right race, and that's pretty standard. And there are other similar stables like that you watch. They'll get them ready in their area, then find the right race, and it's just a matter of identifying them. There's no doubt about that. But then the opposite is there's a lot of shotgun trainers that will take them anywhere. So you've got to be careful. It's just not the case of John's taken one 7 hours, it's going to run well. Paul's taken one 7 hours, it's going to run well. You've got to differentiate and try and work it out, the patterns amongst the stables.
Yeah, that's a good point, and also Steve's issue of trainers having huge runs of success. It could just be, Steve, that it's just a variance. It's a period of variance whereby naturally that stable's having a very good run. It could be following a poor run or a seemingly poor run. Obviously there are other factors as well. I accept that the confidence and perhaps the horses that they have in their stable at that particular point in time have a bearing on it.
It's a punter's nature to think, oh, this guy's got the gear or something, or he's got the magic wand, or he's got something going on. To me, at the end of the day, I don't really worry about why it's happening. I just accept that it is happening, and you do boost, like there's stables like Jason Coyle at the moment, where you've just got to add, you've got to be extremely confident that his horses will at least run to where you think they will, if not better, and just treat it that way. Like Ben Curry in Queensland at the moment, you just don't worry about why or what the background is to it. It's really none of your business, and you just deal with how the horses are going from that stable and treat them accordingly. It happens the opposite way, where you've got strong stables that just seem to fall in a hole, and you've just got to really keep an eye on it, that if they're underperforming, you wait and treat them a little bit more carefully and a bit negatively until they come out the other side of it. It can be silly things like feed, the track work rider's gone. People always say a vet's gone missing. It could be a change in vet, even if they're not saying that they're doing anything untoward. It's just changes like that can make a difference to a whole stable. So you've got to wait for them to come out the other side of that and even back up, and then they'll usually right the ship, and someone like Ben Curry or Coyle might just be getting to a new level where they'll maintain. So you just got to keep an eye on them all.
And with Godolphin now, obviously the talking point's been the change in feed that's been instituted by James Cummings. What that will bring in terms of results. So I suppose we'll be able to see that and monitor that over time.
Feed will be interesting because that's pretty much a straight away thing, and horses will sort of will change week to week off what they're fed, but it's the whole change in preparation. We're probably going to take 6 months till we see what James has done there, and I'm sure that he'll be tinkering with everything from track work to feed to whole preparations, how the horses are going to come into the stable, when they're going to come in, what stage, and then how they get to their races. So the next 6 months with Cummings is probably the most interesting thing for me, just to observe, and it's going to be fun to watch. I think he's going to do a great job.
I think he'll do a great job as well. So thanks, Steve, for those questions. This is from Noel. I'd like to understand what can be gleaned from betting fluctuations. Are moves any more credible between different stables or different bookmakers? Well, I suppose from my point of view, the answer is yes and no. From a bookmaker's point of view, I think if you're looking at corporates, one to look at and one to watch out for is Crown Bet. And if you're looking at Crown and you see an unusual push towards a horse late in betting, and I'm talking about the last, say, 5 minutes of betting, where Crown may be top dressing some of the other bookmakers in terms of offering the best odds, and you see a corresponding ease on Betfair, then that's a real concern for the horse. I've monitored those moves and found that not too many of them find success.
Yeah, William Hill used to do the same, but they seem to be guessing a lot more than Crown Bet do. Crown seem to be much more on the ball, and I'm sure they've got access to better information however they get it, and it seems to give them a nice edge, and they're not afraid to push it. So it's a free tip for most punters that are watching late betting. If you're keen on one and they're the top odds over everybody, be a little bit scared and a little bit more careful with your betting, there's no doubt.
Yeah, perhaps take that into consideration in terms of your bet sizing, if you feel that there's enough evidence there to justify it.
Late betting, definitely, like when he's talking about what can be gleaned from betting fluctuations, the later the more important. It seems to really the market rights up with minutes to go now, basically because so many people can't get on or whatever it is. It's the smarter end of the market's betting later and later and later and later. So early betting, I wouldn't be too worried about it. It doesn't take a lot of money to move, but the later it is, the more money it takes, the more real it is.
For sure, agree with that 100%. In terms of stables, obviously betting moves can be very significant. A couple come to mind, the Edmund stable in Queensland. I'm very, very concerned if their horses drift in the betting, John, especially if you like one. We've got a bit of an interruption here.
No, that's all right. We're back.
Okay, we're back on board. So the Edmund stable, talking about horses adrift in betting, that's a real concern for me. And if I'm backing, say, a Darren Weir horse, I can take a little bit more confidence if I see that horse firm in the betting. What's your
Absolutely, and you got like someone like the Edmonds, who's I've been watching them, and some of their horses, they just firm, and the opposite happens. So it's a good guide to a few different stables. I tend to find that the bigger the stable, the more I watch Betfair, because there's just too many people involved with those stables for their information not to make it back to something like an exchange. So when they're confidently drifting or firming, there's too many mouths to feed in these big stables to keep the information in-house. So whether it's the trainer or someone's tipping somewhere and it's eventually getting back to the exchanges, the bigger the stable, the more it means to me. The smaller stables, it's not coming from them a lot of the time, the fluctuations, it's just someone betting or having an opinion, I find, but the bigger the stable, the more reliable it is.
Well, could it also be formulated, as in, these firmers and the easers in the market are more form angled related than they are stable inspired in terms of information that might be flowing back and forth. But
well, I think
like a Waller stable, for example.
So, like with a Waller, when you see a really confident drift and they tend to perform accordingly, I think it's much more stable related than I would if it was a smaller stable. Then I would say it's form related. So, like if it's for example, it's you or me having an opinion in a Bathurst Maiden that this horse can't win, we're more likely to be the one causing the drift than it will be in a city race where someone's confident this horse hasn't worked well and there's something wrong with it, there's something against it that the public can't find, because that market's already pretty consolidated, and for them to be that confident, it has to come from a stable, I would say. So the smaller the stable, the more I treat it as form. The bigger the stable, the more I treat it as basically inside information getting back to the exchanges.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Right, we've got a one from Michael here. Sounds great, the new show. Paul was wondering, at some point in time, would you be interested in offering your markets on a race by race cost, maybe by charging, say, $4, $5 a race, similar to what you would put out on Betfair when you were offering them there? First of all, I might just address that point. The Betfair markets that I produced in regards to feature race analysis, there's a lot of work that goes behind producing a market and going through the form for each horse and doing a map and so forth. From a cost point of view, it would certainly exceed the sort of money you're talking about, Michael. You'd have to have a lot of subscribers to make it, to warrant it as being something that you want to do. From my point of view, it's something I'm not particularly interested in. I understand where you're coming from. I understand that there's a market there for that, for people interested in buying markets on a casual basis, but on an ad hoc basis, I don't think I'd be interested in doing that. Could you put results on your website? In regards to, I'm not sure which races you're talking about, but Michael, I'm happy if you want to email me and maybe give me a couple of more specifics on that. Looking forward to the new show. As a suggestion, I'd like to see you do a weekly segment where you black book 3 or 4 horses or races a week based on those that ran, say, par times or above at country and provincial meetings. That's something we could certainly talk about, John. And
yeah, I do something similar to that, but it's actually quite difficult to keep up with. Just there's so much racing at the moment, so much happening, but it's definitely something that's doable. I could definitely help. We can go halfway and provide a couple each. I can't see a problem with that.
Yeah, we can certainly look at doing that, and that's a great idea, and we take that on board. Okay, so now we'll move over to a question from Phil. One question will come in for scrutiny is post-race analysis in what to look for in races, comments to validate ratings, to add or deduct from future form analysis, how your subjective bias interplays with the ratings, etc. I would find it invaluable to watch how you go about the process. Being a visual learner, I draw very little from, say, a manual, but nail processes visually, and that's how I maximise potential winners. All the best in what will be a powerful new dimension for ratings to win. Thanks, Phil. In terms of how I go about the process, I tend to have a certain, if you like, checklist or process that I follow each day, as John would, for his form analysis. The subjective bias side of things, I think that needs to be taken into account, certainly. I do take bias into account in terms of its effect on the overall race quality, in terms of the ratings numbers that are produced. But on an individual horse-by-horse basis, in terms of, say, lane bias or pace bias, that's something that you need to ascertain for yourself when looking at the ratings. Because if I was to simply overlay my view on what that's worth or the cost in terms of margin cost or gain, then that might disagree or might be something that's different from your point of view. So it's important to keep the ratings clean and allow clients to individually adjust for in-run type events, you know, checks, blocks, wides, bias, etc. John, what's your thought?
My biggest thing with anything post-race is trying to ascertain how strong or weak the race was, and then I'm aggressive on strong races with my corrections and how forgiving I can be to horses, and I'm aggressive in weak races on how negative I want to be on horses. So that's probably the biggest thing. It is a very personal sort of system to set up, and you've got to try and be as consistent as you can. But for me, it's all about trying to work out which races I want to be really positive about and be forgiving to, and which races I want to hammer, and the ones in the middle you kind of just look and say, oh, half a length. But if it's either way, I'll always go high on the positive races and high on the negative on the weak races. That's probably the best I can give on that sort of topic.
Phil, I think one important point is that if you feel that the horse is, say, being advantaged by a couple of lengths by being in the absolute best part of the track, that you don't actually credit that full amount. You need to come up with a portion of that in terms of your overall adjustment figures, because if you apply the whole lot, you're going to find it affects your market too much for an upcoming race. So, you know, if you take, say, a length off a horse, and that might be 2 points, then you're going to, you know, drastically change the price of that horse in a 100% market. You would take, say, a $6 horse and turn it to $3 if that was the case, or you might take a $6 horse and put it to $10 or $11 or $12. So you've got to understand the impact that a length or two has in terms of how that's going to affect your overall market. And once you've done that, then you can come up with what you might feel fine-tune down to a portion of what that adjustment should be. So, you know, just because a horse got checked and it looked like it might have lost 2 lengths, visually doesn't necessarily mean that the cost to it at the end of the race was 2 lengths. That's our alarm. This is the end of part 1 for
Great alarm.
Punters Academy. So we'll be back with you shortly for the next part 2, and we'll continue with more. Thanks very much.